An interrupted Christmas dinner. It was Christmas Eve. The fire was crackling in the fireplace. Laughter floated around the dining table like a decoration on a tree. Then Grandpa Ernest raised his glass, looked straight at me, and asked with a proud smile, "Lorenz, do you like your new house?" I froze completely. I glanced at my father, Werner, and at Greta, and then at the walls lined with pictures where I was nowhere to be found. "It is a beautiful house," I said. "But it is not mine." Just like that, the warmth in the room vanished. Nobody moved. Nobody said a single thing. In that quiet moment, I knew something was very, very wrong. This is the story of how my family erased me from a house that was supposed to be mine, from a future that was stolen before I even knew it existed. I watched Grandpa Ernest's smile disappear. His gaze flicked back and forth between me and my father, waiting for someone, anyone, to say it was all just a misunderstanding. Nobody did. My father coughed softly, pretending to adjust his napkin. Greta stared down at her wine glass as if it had something important to say. Klaus, my half-brother, just kept eating, acting as if none of this had anything to do with him. Of course, it did not. It never did. Grandpa Ernest slowly put his glass back on the table. The tension in his shoulders rose like a wave. He turned to Werner with an intensity one had not seen in years. "I thought this house was for Lorenz." "It is," Greta said quickly, her voice a little too sweet. "It is for the family." I almost laughed. Just almost. But I knew better. If I had laughed, they would have seen me as unstable, and that is what they were always so ready to believe, that I was dramatic, ungrateful, and cold. "It is fine," I said. My voice was level, completely controlled. "I was just invited for dinner." The silence that came after was not real silence. It was heavy, like a loaded gun. The kind of quiet that just begged for someone to pull the trigger. Grandpa Ernest's eyes locked on me again. "Why do not we take a short walk, son?" It was not a question. I nodded and stood up. My chair scraped against the hardwood floor like a warning. As I followed him into the hallway, I saw Klaus finally glance up for a second. He looked at me as if I was the problem, as if I had made a scene. But I had not. I never did. That was the whole point. The front door closed behind us with a soft click. Snow was falling lightly outside, the kind that mutes every sound and makes your memories feel sharper. Grandpa Ernest did not speak right away. We walked down the steps past the two perfect wreaths Greta had chosen and stopped near the curb. "Tell me the truth," he said. "Is this your house or not?" I looked at him, at the deep lines on his face carved by many years of war, work, and disappointment. And I told him the truth. "No, it is not. I do not live there. I was not told it was being bought. I was not asked. I was simply invited." After I had finished, he just stared at me, blinking slowly. "I wired your father over $600,000 3 years back for a down payment on a property in your name. Your name, Lorenz." "I know," I said. "I found the email last week." His jaw tightened. "And the deed belongs to him and Greta?" Grandpa Ernest's eyes did not blink. "Did you sign anything?" "No. Nothing. I did not even know the house existed until their Christmas card arrived, calling it our family's dream home. That is when I knew something was not right." The wind picked up. I could feel the betrayal sinking into his bones, the same way it had already sunk into mine. But this was different for him. He had thought he was giving me a solid foundation. They had turned it into leverage against him. "I will handle this," he muttered. "Werner thinks he is clever," I corrected quietly. "He thinks I am disposable." Grandpa Ernest turned to me, and he really looked at me. "You were never that. Your mother, may God rest her soul, would never have allowed this to happen." "I know." We just stood there in the cold, the night swallowing our breath. The warmth from the house behind us, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, and Greta's perfectly curated playlist, felt like it belonged to someone else. It always had. "Come back to Chicago with me," Grandpa Ernest said. I hesitated. "I have a room. Lord knows I have 4. One of them is yours if you want it." I looked at him. He was the only man who had ever called me son without any conditions. The one who taught me how to tie a tie, how to drive a stick shift, and how to write a thank you note even when you did not feel thankful. He was not offering pity. He was offering a solid foundation. I needed a foundation. "I will pack my things." He nodded once. It was final. We did not go back inside. We did not owe them an explanation. The next morning, I left without any goodbyes. No word from Greta. Werner was still in bed. Klaus texted me later. "You did not have to make it weird, man." I did not reply. Chicago greeted me with the kind of chill that cleans your lungs. Grandpa Ernest did not say much on the drive. Neither did I. But the silence between us was not heavy. It was a mutual understanding. His house was big, but not showy. Brick, clean lines, and a faint scent of old books and fresh coffee. He showed me the guest room, but it was not a guest room. It had photos of me from years ago, pictures I did not even know existed. The final confrontation. My grandfather had kept everything. My high school newspaper column, the program for my debate state finals. Even a faded drawing I made when I was just 12 years old. The proportions were bad, and the shading was sloppy. It was framed. "This is your home," he said. It always was. And for the first time in many years, I believed someone. I sat there with that will in my hands for a long time. I was not reading it again, I was just holding it as if it were proof that I had not made all of this up, as if it could connect me to something real and something fair. Fairness, though, was a luxury in my family. "Werner is going to say it was just a misunderstanding," I finally said. "He will twist things. He will say I misunderstood your intentions." Grandpa Ernest nodded slowly. "That is why I asked Muller and Schmidt to start digging. I wanted to see if Werner had ever filed a new version. So far, there is nothing. No amended will, no new filing." He looked at me, and for a moment, the weight of his years showed in his quiet expression. "I am ashamed, Lorenz. I handed him a power I should have given to you." I did not speak. I could not, because a part of me, some bitter and broken part, had been waiting my whole life for someone in that family to just say those words. "I failed you." I did not sleep that night. I sat in the library, surrounded by things Grandpa Ernest had saved, things my father had either thrown away or left to rot. There was a photo of me at age 8, riding on my grandfather's shoulders at the county fair. I looked so happy, so unaware. I got out my laptop. I searched for property records, deed history, and the mortgage trail. It was not just the house that my father had taken. It was the entire illusion. The down payment Grandpa had wired went through a shell LLC that was registered under Greta's name. The mortgage was refinanced just 5 months later, put under my father's sole control. My name had never appeared on any of the paperwork, not even once. He had planned it from the very beginning. Even worse, the Christmas card had not just said, "Our family's dream home." It had said, "Thanks to your generous legacy, we built this future together." It was a public lie that was mailed to many relatives who did not know any better. They had used my grandfather's good name as a marketing slogan for their own social standing. And me? I was just an afterthought, a shadow. The next morning, I printed everything, the will, the sticky note, the wire transfer record, and the LLC filings. I slid it all into a clean folder. Grandpa Ernest watched me from across the breakfast table. I want to do this the right way, I told him. He just nodded. You always did. Later that week, I requested a meeting with Werner in a public place, on neutral ground, a restaurant downtown. He agreed. Greta did not come. Klaus did not reply. My father walked in late, just like usual, wearing that smug coat he had bought when the market was good. The one he wore to look like a provider, not a predator. Dorian, he said, nodding as if we were about to play a game of chess. Werner, I said back. No, Dad. Not anymore. I let him order his overpriced steak. I let him sip his wine. I let him feel like he was in control. Then I slid the folder across the table. He blinked at it and smiled a thin smile. What is this? You know what it is. He opened it and flipped through a couple of pages. The smile fell off his face, replaced by something much harder to describe, recognition mixed with an insult. You dug up the old will, he said. You buried it. He put the folder down, folded his hands, and looked at me the way a man looks at a leaky pipe, annoyed, not apologetic. I did not file that version because it was too soon. Your grandfather was grieving. He asked me to hold on to it. Then we talked again later, and he agreed it made more sense to hold the property jointly. You talked. I was not in the room. You were not ready, he said, shrugging. Let us be honest, Lorenz. You have never been very good with responsibility. There it was. I took a deep breath. I let the silence do what silence does best, make the lie bigger. Then I leaned forward. Do not confuse quiet with weakness, Werner. I was not supposed to be ready. I was supposed to be obedient. And now I am neither. He did not say a word. I do not want the house, I added. Not anymore. His eyebrows went up in surprise. I want the truth to be put on the record. I want Grandpa's name cleared. I want every family member who got that card to know exactly what you did. And if I say no? I smiled. For the first time in years, I meant it. Then you will hear from Muller and Schmidt. They are filing the original will with sworn testimony. And if I have to take the stand, I will. He stood up, grabbed the folder, and did not say goodbye. As he walked out of that restaurant, I knew he was scared. Not because he might lose the house, but because he could no longer control the story. A few days after the will arrived, Grandpa Ernest made the call. Werner, he said, his tone flat. We need to talk, all of us, in person. My father must have thought it was about something else, an apology, maybe, or one of my grandfather's famous family reunions. My father, Werner, agreed without a single protest. He just said, of course, Dad. Our Sunday lunch was scheduled, but Grandpa Ernest was not going there to eat, and neither was I. We drove into the driveway right before noon. The snow had started to melt around the edges of the yard, revealing some muddy grass and the brittle hedges that Greta had not bothered to cut back. The front door opened before we had a chance to ring the bell. Werner stood there in a maroon sweater, trying way too hard to look relaxed. Dad, Lorenz, come on in. Greta was hovering right behind him, her arms crossed in a way that pretended to be casual but practically screamed she was on the defensive. We stepped inside the house, the one I once thought would be my home. The smell was different this time. It was less like a holiday and more like a stage, with cinnamon-scented candles trying too hard to hide something that was rotting underneath. We did not go into the dining room. Grandpa Ernest asked to go to the office instead. My father flinched a little at that but nodded. Sure, let us talk. The office was clearly Greta's territory now. It had pale walls, a glass desk, and no sign of the old wooden bookshelf Grandpa Ernest had built with his own hands years ago. There were no family photos either, unless you counted the one of Klaus grinning next to a soccer trophy, which was placed deliberately next to a stack of unopened mail. We all sat down. Grandpa Ernest reached into his coat pocket and took out the copy of the old will. "I want you to explain this," he said, sliding it across the desk. Werner did not even bother to touch it. He just glanced at it, looked at Greta, then back at Grandpa Ernest. "That is an old draft," he said slowly. "A draft that left the house to Lorenz. We talked about updating it together, remember," my father said, "but then Mom passed away, and everything went sideways. You said we would look at it again." "I said we would finalize it," Grandpa Ernest shot back. "You said you would file it." There was a pause. It was not a long one, but it was just long enough to be noticeable. Greta cleared her throat. "That version was not legally binding, was it?" "No," Grandpa Ernest said, "because Werner never filed it." The room went silent. Werner shifted in his seat. "Look, Dad, I did not mean to." "You did not mean to what?" Grandpa Ernest cut him off. "Did you not mean to let me believe Lorenz had a home? Did you not mean to take the money I wired with a specific purpose and use it for yourself?" Greta stepped in again. "The money went into a joint account." Grandpa Ernest turned to her. "I was not talking to you." Greta's lips tightened, but she did not say another word. Werner leaned forward, suddenly desperate. "I thought Lorenz did not want it." I blinked. "What? You never said you wanted the house," he insisted, his eyes darting around the room. "You were always so distant. You left town. You did not come to the planning meetings. We assumed." "You assumed wrong," I said, my voice like ice. Grandpa Ernest did not interrupt me. He let the words hang in the air. My father tried again. "Lorenz, you have always been complicated, sensitive. You pulled away. I thought giving the house to the family, Greta and Klaus, was practical. It was stable." "Stable?" I repeated. "You mean controllable?" He looked down. "You thought I would not ask any questions," I continued. "That I would be grateful just to be invited to dinner." He still did not respond. "Werner," Grandpa Ernest said, his voice quieter now but no less firm. "Did you lie to me about the deed?" My father's voice cracked. "I did not lie. I just did not correct you." Grandpa Ernest stood up. "That is all I needed to know." He looked at me. "We are done here." We did not stay for lunch. Back in the car, Grandpa Ernest sat in silence, his jaw clenched. It was not anger I saw. It was a heartbreak covered up with disappointment. He broke the silence halfway back to Chicago. "He always wanted to be the center of the story," he muttered, even when he did not earn it. "I do not want the house if it means war," I said quietly. "It is not about the house anymore," he replied. "It is about dignity and making things right." I nodded. But something inside of me had already changed. The house was no longer just property. Now it was proof of what I had been denied, of what I had to reclaim. That night, I opened my laptop. I dug up every paper trail I could find, bank transfers, old emails, and even calendar invitations Grandpa Ernest had sent for property viewings, which I had never received. Then I found something else, a photo. It was from 3 years back. Grandpa Ernest was standing in front of an empty lot, smiling, holding a little sign that said, "Future Home." He had copied me on that email, but I never saw it because it had gone to an old email address I had not used since college. My father, Werner, knew about that old email address. He was managing Grandpa Ernest's digital accounts to make everything easier. He must have changed the settings. He made me disappear by simply rerouting the story away from me. The next morning, I made an appointment with a lawyer. Her name was Petra Keller. She had sharp eyes, an even sharper tongue, and a handshake that let you know she was always one step ahead. After looking through all the documents, she looked up at me. "There is definitely a case here," she said. But the will was never filed, I pointed out. She tapped her desk. That does not matter. Intent is everything. If we can prove that your grandfather's financial decisions matched the terms of this will and that Werner intentionally misled him, we have grounds for fraud, a constructive trust, and maybe even financial abuse of an elder. Will that get the house back? I asked. She just smiled. It will do more than that. The next few weeks were quiet on the surface, but a lot was happening behind the scenes. Grandpa Ernest gave me full financial power of attorney. Petra's firm started pulling every single record they could find. Werner received a polite but very firm letter asking for the deed to be frozen until a legal review could be completed. That was the first time he called me. "Lorenz," he said, his voice tight. "Why are you doing this? Why did you do it?" I asked back. He did not answer, just sighed loudly. "You know this will tear the family apart." "There was no family left to tear apart," I said. "Not after what you did." He hung up the phone. A few days later, Greta sent me a long email. It was not an apology. It was an act. She framed the whole thing as a misunderstanding, accused me of putting Grandpa Ernest through a lot of unnecessary stress, and ended it with, "We just want peace, Lorenz. Especially for Klaus's sake." I did not respond. Klaus never cared. He had not called. He had not sent me another text message. Not even when the notice about the deed came through and my father had to explain to him why things suddenly felt unstable. I was not surprised. He had grown up being told that I was complicated and difficult, the one who always overreacted. That was the story they sold him. One night, as I was boxing up old things at Grandpa Ernest's house, I found a letter. It was in my mother's handwriting. It was dated the year before she passed away. Inside, she had written, "If anything ever happens to me, please do not let Werner make all the decisions for Lorenz. He is not a bad person, but he does not understand him. He does not even try. Lorenz will need an anchor. He will need someone who truly sees him." I sat there for a long time after reading that. Then I folded the letter and put it in the same envelope as the old will. It was going to be useful. The first court date was set for early spring. Petra said it was likely to be settled before then, but she prepared me for the long fight. "People like your father do not give things up until they are forced to." She was right because 2 weeks later, my father filed a motion claiming Grandpa Ernest was not of sound mind when he originally wrote the will. That was his plan, to call his own father senile just to keep a house. Petra smiled when she read the filing. "Good. He just showed us his biggest weakness, which is his character," she said. "Or the lack of it." I did not tell Grandpa Ernest about the motion right away. He had been sleeping more and eating less. But one night, I showed him the document and let him read it all the way through. He set the papers down and whispered, "He did that?" I nodded. He did not look angry, just tired. Then he stood up, walked to his desk, and pulled out a leather-bound planner. "This," he said, handing it to me, "is every single appointment I had with the real estate agents, the bank, the inspector. Every signature, every check I wrote is dated and initialed." I opened the book. It was all there. It was proof that he was sharp, careful, and committed, proof that he was in every sense of the word of sound mind. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders and thought about what justice really meant. Not revenge, not even winning, just making things right. Because when someone spends years slowly erasing you, what you want most is not praise or punishment. You just want to exist again. To be seen. To be documented. To be acknowledged. To walk into a house and know you belong there, not because someone gave it to you out of pity, but because it was yours from the very beginning. It was not a courtroom just yet, it was only a high-rise conference room on the 25th floor of a building with glass panels in downtown Chicago. But to me, it felt more important than any courtroom I had ever imagined. The walls were cold, neutral, and gray. A pitcher of water sat untouched on the long mahogany table. At the head of the table sat Petra, who was calm and sharp, with her notes arranged with surgical precision. To my left was Grandpa Ernest, who was pale but composed. His cane rested against his chair. He had not said much during the ride over here, but his strong grip on my arm when we walked in said more than enough. The deposition. Sitting across from me was Werner, with his lawyer, a slick guy named Eric Jaeger, who introduced himself with a grin that never reached his eyes. Greta was not there. Her signature on the deed was not a question yet. Petra began. This is a formal deposition in the Richter vs. Richter case file 8619 CIV regarding claims of fraud, financial abuse of an elder, and misrepresentation of property ownership. Everyone present here is being recorded. Werner nodded once, his body stiff. Petra continued, Mr. Werner Richter, did you receive a bank transfer from your father, Ernest Richter, on May 12, 2022, for the amount of $875,000? Werner shifted in his chair. Yes. What was the stated purpose of that transfer? He hesitated. To help with the purchase of a home. For whom? For the family. Petra did not blink. Please be specific. Werner cleared his throat. For my son. For Lorenz. Was the house ever registered in Lorenz Richter's name? No. Was he ever told that funds had been transferred for his benefit? There was a long silence. I do not recall, he said. Petra smiled faintly. Would you like me to show you the email your father sent to you and Lorenz on May 20, 2022, which outlined his expectations for the property and asked for updates? Eric Jaeger immediately cut in. We object to the phrasing. The witness has stated that he does not recall. Petra handed over the printout anyway. Then let us refresh his memory. Werner took the page reluctantly. His eyes quickly scanned the contents. I watched his face tighten just a little when he saw my name on the carbon copy line. He slid the paper back. I must have missed that, he said. Or rerouted it? Petra asked. I do not know what you are implying, he said, his voice flat. Oh, I think you do. The questioning continued. Petra brought out bank statements, deposit slips, text message logs, and old calendar invitations. Each one painted a silent but damning picture. Werner had not just forgotten to tell me. He had taken specific steps to keep me out of it, changing my email settings, filtering mail, canceling calendar invites, and moving money through joint accounts with Greta. He never yelled and he never confessed anything. But by the time the deposition reached its halfway point, the sheer weight of the paper evidence was impossible to deny. Even his own lawyer, Jaeger, looked less confident. Then came the real turning point. Mr. Richter, Petra said, sliding a printed document forward, are you familiar with this version of your father's will? He barely even looked at it. It was never filed. But it was written, signed, and dated. Would you like to explain this sticky note in your handwriting that says, we will file this together once we add Susan and Ben? Werner's body stiffened. That note was not official. But it does demonstrate intent, Petra said. And intent matters. Werner stayed silent. She waited for a second, then turned to Grandpa Ernest. Mr. Ernest Richter, do you recall asking your son to file this version of the will on your behalf? Grandpa Ernest leaned forward slowly. Yes, he said. He said he would handle it. I believed him. Petra nodded. Did you ever change those instructions? No. Did you ever give him permission to change it without your knowledge? No. Her voice got sharper. Did he ever tell you that the property would be registered under his name and Greta's instead of Lorenz's? Grandpa Ernest's eyes narrowed. Never. That single word hit like a hammer. The deposition was supposed to last over 90 minutes. It went on for close to 3 hours. By the end, Werner was sweating right through his shirt collar. Jaeger's objections had gotten weak. Every defensive move had been countered by a piece of paper. But Petra was not finished yet. "We have one more item," she said, reaching into her briefcase. It was a letter. My mother's letter. "I would like this to be entered as supplemental context. It is not a legal instruction, but it does reflect the family dynamic, especially regarding Mr. Werner Richter's long-term treatment of his son." Jaeger raised an eyebrow. "A letter from a person who is deceased?" Petra slid it across the table. "A mother's words written a year before she died. Addressed to the man who now calls her son too complicated to inherit anything." Werner went pale. He did not read the letter. He could not. After we left, Grandpa Ernest leaned heavily on his cane. "I never thought I would see the day my own son was questioned like that." I offered him my arm. "I am sorry it had to be this way." "No," he said, his jaw firm. "I am sorry I did not see it sooner." We got into the car. The city moved all around us in a soft blur. I watched the traffic lights flashing on buildings that did not care about bloodlines or betrayals. I was only thinking about truth, and maybe, just maybe, recovery. That night, I could not sleep. I kept hearing my father's voice from the deposition. Not the words he said, but the sound of his voice, the way it went from being a performance to pure panic. A man so used to being in control was suddenly faced with consequences. I thought about all the Thanksgivings where I got stuck with the smallest bedroom, the birthdays that were forgotten, the graduation where nobody showed up, and I wondered if this had always been the plan. I felt like I was facing a choice. Was I simply a ghost in my own life, or was I deliberately erased from it? The next morning, a new email arrived from Petra. The subject line said, "Formal offer." I opened it. It was from Eric Jaeger, my father's lawyer. They were attempting to settle the case. Through his legal counsel, my father proposed the following: a transfer of some of the ownership of the house he co-shared with Greta, a secret financial amount for what he called family reparations, and a non-disparagement clause, which meant I would have to be silent about everything. I just stared at the screen. They wanted me quiet. They wanted to pay me off. They wanted to fix the appearance of a happy family even if everything beneath it was completely rotten. I forwarded the email to Grandpa Ernest. His response was immediate. "We do not negotiate with cowards. We correct the record. Finish this." And I understood exactly what he meant. He was not just talking about me, but about every single time someone silently agrees to be erased just to keep the peace. The courthouse was not grand. There were no marble pillars or high ceilings that made you feel like justice was echoing around you. Just beige walls, humming fluorescent lights, and worn-out carpet that had seen far too many families fall apart. But to me, it was sacred ground. I sat next to Petra at the plaintiff's table, my hands still and my jaw tight. Grandpa Ernest sat right behind us. He had on his old wool coat, the same one he used to take me to the museum in when I was a boy. It was a silent reminder that you take your history with you into a fight. Werner was across the aisle from us, his tie was too neat, and his hair was dyed just a little too dark. Greta was not next to him. Not today. I took her absence as its own kind of confession. The judge, an older woman named Justice Eleanor Davies, called us to order. "Opening statements," she said, nodding. Petra stood, as calm as a winter day. "Your Honor, this is not just a disagreement over property. This is a story of betrayal by leaving things out, of legal manipulation disguised as family dynamics. Mr. Lorenz Richter was promised a home by his grandfather, both in feeling and in fact. That promise was deliberately taken by his father, Mr. Werner Richter, who used his position and his father's grief to rewrite that future for himself. Today we are here to set the record straight, not for revenge, but for clarity. Eric Yeager followed with his usual slick approach. This case is a sad misunderstanding between relatives. We believe that while our client, Mr. Richter, did accept money from his father, there was never a legally binding promise to transfer the property to the plaintiff. This is a matter of memory, not malice. I almost laughed at that. Memory, not malice. Tell that to the will that was never filed, or the email that disappeared, or the photos that were taken off the hallway walls. The first couple of witnesses were procedural, a paralegal from Mueller and Schmidt who confirmed dates and email trails, then the bank officer who handled the wire transfer. But it was the next witness, Grandpa Ernest, who commanded the room. He walked slowly, each step like a memory. Once he was sworn in, he sat down with a quiet intensity. Petra's voice softened. Mr. Richter, can you tell us in your own words why you transferred the money to your son? He did not hesitate. Because Lorenz deserved a home. I promised his mother before she passed away that we would take care of him, that he would have something of his own when he was ready. I trusted Werner to make it happen. Did you specify what the funds were for? I did. In writing. Did you expect Lorenz's name to be on the title? Yes. Was it? No. She let the silence hang in the air like an anchor that was just dropped. Did you ever give your son permission to change your will? No. Did you ever ask him to delay the filing? Never. And to your knowledge, was this will, the one that named Lorenz as the sole heir, ever filed? He shook his head. No, it was shelved without my permission. Yeager tried to cross-examine him, but it went badly. Mr. Richter, would you say your memory has gotten worse in recent years? Grandpa Ernest smiled coldly. My bones may forget, sir. My blood does not. The judge did not even try to hide her smirk. Then came the surprise. Petra stood up. Your Honor, with permission, we would like to call an additional witness, one who was disclosed late because of recent contact. The doors opened. Klaus, my half-brother, was dressed in a wrinkled hoodie and jeans, with his head down, but he walked to the stand like someone carrying a secret that was too heavy for too long. Werner's body went rigid. You could see his jaw lock. Once he was sworn in, Petra asked Klaus, do you remember the evening your family moved into the Christmas Creek property? He nodded. Yeah, there were boxes everywhere. Dad was stressed. Did you overhear any conversations that day? Klaus hesitated. He told Greta not to tell Lorenz anything yet, that he would find out eventually, but only after we were settled. He said Grandpa would not remember the details anyway. A whisper moved through the room. Did he ever mention the will? Klaus looked down. He said if it was not filed, it did not count. And that once Grandpa moved to a home or passed away, he would make sure things were locked down. And that once Grandpa moved to a home or passed, he'd make sure things were locked down. Gregory jumped up. This is ridiculous. He's a teenager. He doesn't know what he heard. The judge pounded her gavel. Mr. Marston, sit down. He did slowly, but his eyes burned toward his son. Ben swallowed. I'm sorry, Dad, but it wasn't right. And just like that, the air changed. You could feel the shift like a tide finally giving way to truth. After recess, Morin presented the final documents, the old will, the email chains, and the sticky note in Gregory's handwriting. She ended with a simple statement. No one should have to fight this hard for something they were already promised. Gregory's defense collapsed the next day. Susan declined to testify. Through her lawyer, she stated she wanted to remove herself from all legal proceedings. Van tried to stall motioning for settlement, arbitration, or even mediation. The judge denied it all. She called for closing statements. Morin stood. Your Honor, what matters most here is that intent, clear, documented intent was violated. This is not about punishing a man for being greedy. It's about protecting the dignity of a legacy meant for someone who was systematically excluded. Van said little. The verdict will be announced in 1 week. That night, Grandpa and I sat on his back porch, whiskey in hand, watching snowfall over his quiet Chicago street. "You okay?" he asked. "I think so," he nodded. "He never wanted to raise you. You know that, right? Your mom saw it. She made me promise just in case. I just thought he'd change." "I know. And I waited too long to fix it." I turned to him. "You're fixing it now." He looked at me then, not with regret, but resolve. "Whatever happens next, this part, you won." And I believed him. The courthouse smelled the same. Old paper, bad coffee, and fear. But this time, the fear wasn't mine. I sat on the left side of the courtroom. Morin was next to me, calm, confident, her legal pad already open. Across the aisle, Gregory sat alone. No Susan, no Ben. Even his lawyer, Vaughn, looked more like a handler than an ally. He wasn't wearing his usual custom-tailored suit. Instead, it looked like something bought last minute, a size too tight collar slightly wrinkled. The man who once boasted over estate strategy now wouldn't meet my eyes. The bailiff called the session to order. "All rise." Judge Monroe entered. She didn't smile. She rarely did. Her face as always was unreadable like a granite statue sculpted to intimidate. "This is the ruling for Marston v. Marston." She began regarding legal ownership of the Christmas Creek property and allegations of intentional suppression of testamentary documents. Her voice echoed off the cheap acoustic panels. Gregory shifted. I didn't blink. Judge Monroe continued. After reviewing the plaintiff's documentation, including financial transfers made by Mr. Ernest Marston in 2018, the intended designation of property in a preliminary will draft and testimonial statements from both Ernest Marston and corroborating witnesses this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Dorian Marston. The sentence didn't register at first. It was too simple. Then Morin touched my wrist lightly. "Just wants confirmation." Judge Monroe kept speaking. "Therefore, legal ownership of the Christmas Creek property will be transferred to Mr. Marston. Within 30 calendar days, any mortgage lien or encumbrance placed upon the property after the 2018 financial transfer will be deemed void unless explicitly agreed upon by the plaintiff." Gregory leaned forward slightly as if to say something, but said nothing, his hands clenched on the bench. White knuckles. Judge Monroe looked directly at him now. "Furthermore, the court advises the district attorney's office to consider initiating a formal investigation into possible financial misconduct, including embezzlement, perjury, and obstruction of estate management." And just like that, the man who tried to erase me turned to ash. Outside the courthouse, flashes went off. Reporters, microphones, questions I didn't answer. I kept walking. Grandpa was waiting near the parking lot. He wasn't wearing a tie, just his old coat and that soft smile I hadn't seen in months. He didn't say anything, just put his hand on my shoulder and looked me in the eye. "You did good, kid," he said after a moment. "Your mother would have been proud." I nodded. "So would you." He gave a short, tired laugh. "Hell yes, I am." The weight didn't disappear, but it shifted. It was no longer on me. The next morning, I woke to an email. Subject: formal apology and relinquishment. "Dorian, I acknowledge the court's ruling and will comply with the transfer of the property. I understand the DA may reach out to me and will cooperate. For what it's worth, I never meant to hurt you. I did what I thought I had to do." Gregory, I read it once, closed my laptop. Some apologies are just seatbelts offered after the crash. 2 months later, I unlocked the door to the Christmas Creek house. My house. The key turned differently now, lighter, smoother. I stepped inside. It still smelled the same wood polish, old pine, and lemon oil. But the air carried something else, too, in absence. No voices, no pretending, just silence and mind to shape. The walls were still lined with framed photos. Susan had arranged them like a museum exhibit, curated memories, perfect lighting, smiles, polished for company. I wasn't in a single one, not even the background. I took them down one by one. Some of them shattered, most did not. I was not replacing them with revenge, I was replacing them with the truth. There was a photo of my mom and me sitting on the floor, coloring trees with crayons. One of Grandpa Ernest and me soaked to the bone from the rain, grinning under a graduation banner. Another photo was just of me, taken the day I got my first apartment. My eyes looked tired, but they were real. And in the hallway, I left one frame empty, just glass. Under it, I put a note, space reserved for what is real. Upstairs, I opened the closet in my old room. Most of my childhood things were gone, either donated, boxed up, or just erased. But in the corner, buried behind Greta's stack of yoga mats and scented candles, was a single flat envelope. It had no stamp and no name, just my initials on the front. I opened it slowly. Inside was a letter in my mother's handwriting. Lorenz. If you are reading this, then something did not go as planned. I am so sorry. I tried to make everything simple. I wanted this house to be your anchor. Not because it is big or beautiful, but because I believed you would make it warm again. If someone tried to take it from you, I hope you fought for it. Not for the bricks and the wood beams, but for the truth. Forgiveness is a noble thing, but so is protection. If you had to choose one, I trust you made the right call. I will love you always. Mom. I read it 2 times, then once more. I folded it up, put it back in the envelope, and left it on the windowsill where we used to sit and draw trees. It was not for closure, it was for continuity. I did not throw a party. I did not post anything online, but I did invite Grandpa Ernest over for tea. We sat by the fireplace, in the exact same spot where the lie had begun to fall apart just a few months ago. He noticed the walls right away. You changed the photos, he said. I nodded. He smiled. Good. The house looks like it is breathing again. We sipped our tea in silence. Then he said, Are you going to keep it? I do not know, I said honestly. Maybe for a while. Then maybe I will sell it. He nodded. There was no judgment. He understood what very few people ever do. Sometimes the value of a thing is not in owning it, but in reclaiming it first. Now when I walk through the hallway, I do not flinch at the photos. Now when I stand on the porch, I do not hear their laughter. And when I sleep, I do not dream of anything, which for once, is peace. If you are still with me, thank you. Justice is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet. It arrives like snow, slowly and surely covering up everything that is false. But it leaves one thing visible, the path you took to get here. It started with a voicemail. Not a call and not a knock. Just a message I did not expect and almost did not listen to. Lorenz, it is Greta. I know I am probably the last person you want to hear from, but I left something behind at the house in the attic. It is in a blue tin that is marked, Christmas lights. If you find it, just please do not throw it away before I come by. I will only be 10 minutes. Click. There was no apology and no explanation, just a request. I waited a couple of days before I responded. Not because I needed time to think, but because silence was no longer something I was afraid of. It was something I could control. Eventually, I replied, tomorrow, noon. Do not be late. She was not. She arrived in a silver SUV that still had the faint smell of new leather and wealth. But she looked older now, and smaller somehow, with the kind of tired eyes that makeup cannot cover. I opened the door, but I did not step aside. "You said 10 minutes," I said. She gave a quick nod, clutching her designer handbag like it was a shield. "Yes, thank you." She walked in without waiting for my permission. The house had not changed much since the court ruling, but it felt different. No curated smiles, no music playing in the background, no pretending. Just breath and truth. She stopped near the stairs, her hand brushing the banister as if she expected it to remember her. "I will go straight up," she said. I followed, not because I did not trust her, but because I needed to see what she had buried up there. The attic door got stuck slightly, the way it always had. She pulled it open, revealing the narrow staircase and the layer of dust that was coating everything. At the top, she walked straight to the far corner. There was no hesitation. She moved a few boxes, my old books, some of my mom's holiday decorations, and pulled out a large blue tin that was labeled "Christmas Lights." She did not open it. She just held it with both hands tight around the edges. "Is that it?" I asked. She nodded, but her lips were trembling slightly. "Then, do you mind if I sit for a second?" We were surrounded by insulation and rafters, but I gestured toward an old wooden stool. She sat down slowly. She said, "I suppose you want to know what is in here." I did not answer her because silence was not agreement, but it was pressure. And she finally gave in to it. She opened the tin. Inside, there were no lights. There were letters, tied up in stacks with rubber bands, yellowed and old. She handed one to me. I knew the handwriting right away. It was my mother's. "Your mother," Greta said quietly, "wrote to my mother a lot when they were younger. But especially after you were born." I just stared at her. "She kept everything," Greta said, "even the ones she never got a response to." My throat tightened. I pulled out the first letter. "Dear Greta, I know we have not always gotten along. And maybe we never will, but Lorenz is here now. And whatever you think of me, I hope that one day you will think of him differently. He did not ask for this broken family. But maybe he is the one who will heal it. Maybe he is the one who will see past all the things we have both ruined." I folded it back up. Greta did not look at me. "She gave me this tin before she passed away," she said, her voice thin. "She told me to give it to you when the time was right. Why did you not?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She bit her lip. "Because the time was never right. And then Werner and I had our own plans. And you were always so distant." I laughed, a bitter, low sound. "Distant? You built a whole house without me. You put my half-brother's name on the deed. You called it a family home." Her voice suddenly rose. "Because he made things easier. He did not question anything. He did not make us feel guilty." There it was. The truth that no one ever said out loud. I was inconvenient. I was not rebellious or angry, just a constant reminder of a woman they could not control and of a legacy they could not rewrite. "You wanted me to be silent," I said. "And when I would not give it, you gave my place to someone else." Greta looked down at the letters, her shoulders shaking. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought if we just moved on, it would be better for everyone." "You did not move on," I said. "You covered everything up. There is a big difference." We sat in the attic for a long, quiet moment. The insulation rustled in a small breeze from a vent. Somewhere far below us, a car drove by. She finally stood up. "I am sorry," she said. And this time, it almost sounded like she meant it. But I did not say, "I forgive you," because forgiveness is not a show. It is a process. I stood up, still holding the tin. "You can have a few of these letters. The rest of them stay here." Her eyes went wide, but she did not argue. Maybe she knew she had already kept them from me for long enough. We walked down in silence. At the front door, she turned to me. "Is there anything you need from me?" I thought about it, then said, "No, but if you ever speak to Klaus again, tell him that I do not hate him. He just made his choice. And so did I." She nodded, then left. Later that night, I sat in the kitchen. Letters were spread out in front of me like maps of a past no one ever thought I would get to see. Some were angry, some were gentle, and some were scared. But all of them were real. And in each one, I saw parts of myself I had not known were being recorded. In her sadness, my mother had written herself raw. And somehow, Greta, who was flawed and weak and complicit, had been the one to keep it all. Maybe that was what bothered me the most. She was not the villain I wanted her to be. Just a woman who was too weak to carry what she was given and too proud to ask for help. But I was not here to save her. I was here to remember my mother, to take back the things that silence had tried to erase. The attic is empty now, except for one box. It holds the letters and the tin, and a new label I wrote on it in a black marker. It does not say, "Lights." It says, "Still shines." The first snow of March came early that year. It covered Chicago in a soft quiet, as if the city itself wanted to be still for once. I woke up to the sound of it. That thick stillness you can only hear when the world decides not to make any noise. I knew exactly where I had to go. There was a cemetery on the west side. It was not famous or fancy, just rows of simple markers and quiet trees. My mom had chosen it herself. She said she liked that it did not try too hard to be anything it was not. The drive took a half hour. I did not turn on the radio. When I got there, the gate was slightly open. The groundskeeper nodded as I walked past him, but he did not say a single word. I found her plot the way you find an old photograph in a forgotten drawer, unexpected and familiar all at once. Evelyn Richter, 1962 to 2011. She listened more than she spoke. That was the line I had chosen when I was 22. I barely remember picking it. I just remember thinking she would have liked something simple, something honest. I stood there for a long time before I spoke. "Hi, Mom." The wind stirred a little bit, brushing some snow from the top of the stone. "I read your letters, the ones you wrote to Greta. I did not even know they existed, but you kept writing them anyway. That says a lot." I took a breath. "I thought about reading them to you, but I think you already know what they say." I knelt then, resting one gloved hand on the earth. "I do not know what you would think of me right now. If you would be proud. If you would be hurt. If you would ask why I waited this long to fight for something I was supposed to have all along." The air was still, not cold, not warm, just suspended. "But I think I know what you would ask me if you were here. You asked it in the letters again and again, even without the words. Did you choose protection or forgiveness?" I exhaled, watching my breath hang like smoke. I chose protection for a long time. I thought if I just stayed quiet, stayed composed, and did not stir the waters, no one could accuse me of being difficult. No one could hurt me if I did not expect anything. I swallowed hard. But I think I am ready to choose something else now. There was no answer, of course. No voice from the clouds, no sudden sunbeam. But there was a peace, a kind I had not felt in years. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a photograph. It was us, Mom and me, on a bench near Lake Michigan just before my senior year. Her scarf was crooked. My hair was too long. We were both laughing. I placed it against the headstone and anchored it with a stone. "I did not forget you," I said. "Even when they tried to, even when they made a family that did not include me, I stood. And I forgive you for the parts of me you did not get to finish." I paused, then added, "And I forgive myself, too." The wind blew harder then, almost sharp, almost approving. That evening, back at Grandpa Ernest's house, I made a fire. He came into the living room, a newspaper tucked under his arm. "You were out for a long time today." I visited Mom. He sat down without asking anything else. Then he said quietly, "You look different." "How so?" "Like you finally said something you needed to." I nodded. I did. Later that night, I opened the last letter in the tin, one Greta had not mentioned. The envelope was worn, unopened, addressed simply to Lorenz, someday. Inside was a single page. "If you are reading this, then it means you found what I could not say in person. I do not know how the story ends, sweetheart, but I do know this. You do not have to earn your place in a family that loves you. And you do not have to prove your worth by staying quiet. You are not a burden. You are not too much. You are mine and you are already enough." Mom. I did not cry. Not then. But something loosened. Something I did not even realize I had been holding onto for decades. That night, I slept without dreaming. And in the morning, I made coffee. Not for anyone else, just for me. It was a Thursday, the kind of gray-skied afternoon where time does not seem to move. I was working on Grandpa Ernest's porch, fixing a loose railing he had put off since the fall, when I heard the car. A silver Acura rental. I knew the kind of license plate it had. Klaus. He stepped out slower than I had expected. Not sheepish, but not arrogant either, just hesitant, like someone unsure whether the ground would hold. He did not wave. I did not move. "Hey," he said finally. I rested the drill on the step. "You drove over 8 hours for, hey?" Klaus's mouth twitched. It was not a smile, not quite. "I figured you would not pick up if I called." He was right. I stood and wiped my hands on a towel. "So why are you here?" He shoved his hands into his jacket pockets. "I guess I did not want us to end like that." "Us?" I echoed. He looked away, then back at me. "I should have said something. That night, I saw the look on your face when Grandpa asked about the house. I knew it was not right, and I was a coward." There it was. 3 words that weighed more than most of the apologies I had heard all year. I sat back down on the porch step. "Did Dad send you?" "No," Klaus said quickly. "He does not know I am here." That surprised me more than I cared to show. "He is not talking to me either," Klaus added after a moment. "He says I embarrassed the family when I did not show up for Greta's birthday brunch." I laughed, a cold laugh. The horror. Klaus cracked a small smile. "I guess I finally saw what you had been seeing for years." I looked at him for the first time, for real. I saw him not just as the golden child or the quiet observer, but as someone who might have been lost, just in a different way than me. "You were never cruel," I said. "Just convenient." He nodded slowly. "That is fair." There was a long silence between us, filled with the sound of snow melting and dripping off the roof. Then he pulled something out of his jacket pocket. A photo. It was a picture of the two of us at the lake house back in the summer of 2008. He was grinning, with a few teeth missing. I was holding a fishing pole. Grandpa Ernest's arm was around both of our shoulders. "I found it in a drawer at Dad's," he said. "I thought maybe you would want it." I took it carefully. The corners were frayed. "I remember that weekend," I said quietly. "You caught a fish. I caught a cold. You tried to convince me it was pneumonia so we would not have to clean the dock." That made both of us smile. A real smile this time. Klaus looked down, then back up. "I am not asking for anything. Not forgiveness, not family dinners. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. What they did." I held his gaze. You did not speak up when it mattered, I said. And I cannot forget that. But I can let go of the weight. He nodded. I do not need you to carry guilt, I added. Just do not pretend you were not there. Another pause. This one was gentler. I will not, he said. We stood there in the quiet, not as brothers, and not as enemies, just as two men who shared a history they did not write and a silence they no longer needed to fill. When Klaus turned to go, I did not stop him, but I did not close the door either. That evening, I placed the lake house photo on my desk. It was not on the wall, not on display, but it was not hidden either. It was just there, like a chapter in a book that you finished reading but cannot quite forget. Later, Grandpa Ernest and I had dinner. He noticed the photo immediately, but he did not say anything. Instead, he poured 2 glasses of scotch and raised his glass. To letting him go. I clinked my glass against his. And not forgetting. Spring arrived late in Chicago that year. It was subtle, a breeze that no longer bit, a sky that dared to stay blue past 6 o'clock. Grandpa Ernest's tulips bloomed early on the front lawn, stubborn against the chill. It was the kind of season that crept in rather than announced itself, like healing. It had been a few months since the court ruling, 2 since Klaus's visit, and just a few days since the final deed transfer had arrived, notarized and sealed in a plain envelope. Christmas Creek was mine. I had not gone back until now. I parked in front of the house just after noon. The street was quiet. The same plastic flamingos still decorated the neighbor's yard, their pink color faded but still cheerfully defiant. I walked up the driveway. The grass had grown unevenly along the edge of the bricks. A small vine had snaked across the porch step. Time had settled in without asking for permission. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air was still, not stale, just silent. I moved slowly through the entryway. The faint scent of lemon cleaner still hung in the corners. A single magazine remained on the side table. On the cover, Greta's favorite celebrity chef was smiling widely. The dining room table stood in the exact same spot it had on Christmas Eve, only without any warmth. The same chandelier, the same wallpaper. Only this time, I noticed the small cracks behind the picture frames. I walked upstairs into my old room, or rather, the guest room I had always been told was mine, but that never had any trace of me until now. I carried a box inside from the car. In it were books, a photo of my mom, my college pennant, and the one thing I had waited months to place, a small brass key. I set it on the nightstand, not because it opened anything in the house, but because it was a symbol of what I had claimed. Not revenge, not even restitution, but a return. I spent the afternoon removing the last of Greta's decorations. The porcelain angel collection was boxed. The framed motivational quote about family values was taken down without any ceremony. I did not do it with malice, I did it with precision. And when I was finished, the house looked less curated and more honest. I sat on the front porch as evening fell, sipping the last of Grandpa Ernest's favorite bourbon, watching the sky change color. And for the first time, I understood. This house had never been about ownership. It had been about erasure, and now it was about acknowledgement. The next day, I drove to the county clerk's office and filed the paperwork to sell the property. The market value was strong. Offers would come quickly. But that was not why I was smiling. I was smiling because I was free to choose. I was not staying in a house that was bought with lies. I was not holding on to walls that had once kept me out. I was not punishing myself by holding on to anything. I was letting go on my own terms. A fortnight later, on the last day before the closing, I returned one final time. I stood in the center of the living room. It was empty now, and echoes of past dinners, arguments, and silences drifted around like dust. I did not chase them away. I walked to the fireplace and placed a final object on the mantel. A photo of my mom. Just her. There were no captions, no frame, just the image of a woman who once believed her son would build something honest. Then I turned to leave, and this time, I did close the door behind me. Grandpa Ernest met me back in Chicago with 2 coffees and a small envelope. "What is this?" I asked. He smiled. "Something your mom wrote. I found it in an old shoe box after you moved in." I opened it carefully. It was not long, just her handwriting, which was looping and uneven. "If they ever forget who you are, remind them with grace. If they ever rewrite your place, you write something louder. And when you come home, make sure it is yours. Mom." I folded it slowly. And we sat there, 2 generations deep in silence, letting those words fill all the spaces that had once been hollow. Thank you for walking this road with me. If this story spoke to you, leave a comment. Share your thoughts. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.